All right, there we are. Seems like a good number of us are in and settled, so let's go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 2023-2024 Better Buildings webinar series, dedicated to bringing you the latest actionable insights from industry-leading experts. This annual series is a chance to explore the topics, technologies, and trends that affect your organization, as well as the efforts to accelerate decarbonization and energy efficiency adoption. Next slide. Today's webinar is called Illuminating Impact, Integrated Lighting Campaign Gives Back to the Community. Thank you so much for joining. We've got quite a program for you today. With me are two guest speakers that will tell us about a lighting upgrade at a city public safety building and how they secured some unique financing and all the lessons they learned along the way. Next slide. My name is Axel Pearson. I will be your moderator today. I'm a project manager at Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, and I lead the integrated lighting campaign, which I'll tell you a bit about in a few slides. But before we dive in, there's a few housekeeping points I'd like to cover. Next slide, please. Please note that today's webinar will be recorded and archived on the Better Building Solutions Center. So if you'd like to navigate there now, go to betterbuildingsolutioncenter.energy.gov, hover over events and webinars, and then click on on-demand webinars. From there, you can click on lighting or some other technology. Personally, I recommend lighting to find this webinar and many more. And we will follow up with all of you when today's session is over and the recording is available. So you'll have those ready for you. Next, we are going to use Slido for polls and Q&A. Hopefully you've used this before, but if not, we have a kind of a test poll coming up and we can try it out and you can get used to it. Attendees are in listen-only mode, meaning your microphones are muted. If you experience any audio or visual issues, do you see my mouth moving but don't hear my words? Send a message to the Q&A box located in Zoom. At the bottom of your Zoom panel, we have a team behind us, behind the scenes that are helping us out, and they can certainly help you. Finally, if you have any questions about the integrated lighting campaign or today's webinar, you can always email us at integratedlighting@pnnl.gov. Happy to take your lighting related questions or just talk lighting. We like it. Okay, next slide, please. So this is what we've got on tap today. We've already started the introduction. I'm going to give you an overview of the integrated lighting campaign. We've got some welcome polls for you. I will introduce our guest speakers. They will tell us about their project, and then we'll close with some Q&A and conclusion. I'll tell you more about the webinar, Better Buildings webinar series. So that's what you have to look forward to for the next hour. Next slide, please. Okay, so I mentioned Slido. If you haven't used it, it's an interactive platform for Q&A and polling. Please go to www.slido.com on your mobile device or by opening a new window on your internet browser. Today's event code is hashtag or pound sign, depending on your generation, DOE. If you would like to ask our panelists questions, please submit them at any time throughout the presentation. They will stack up. You get to vote on them. It's a pretty cool interface, so check it out. And we will answer the most popular questions at the end of the webinar. If we don't get to all the questions, we'll follow up via email, so don't fret. Okay, here we are. Let's try some polls. We want to learn more about you. Who do we have on the call? So let's start off with a question. Join us over at Slido to respond to the following questions. Again, if you're having any issues, please message our tech support team by using the Zoom Q&A function. So that should be at the bottom of your Zoom screen. I already see people responding. It looks like we have 22, 26, and 30. Wow, thank you so much. Yeah, let's give it a few seconds. Responses are still rolling in. If you haven't gone to slido.com, it's pretty quick. Just go to the website, enter hashtag DOE, and answer the prompts. So this is a good sign that we have the highest level or of attendee is government and public buildings. Lucky for you, we have the city of Berkeley with us today. They upgraded the lighting in their public safety building. So hopefully this is very relevant for you. Um, okay, still, I don't want to cut anyone off. I want to give people a chance. It's still ticking up. I'll just keep talking until I see that number level off. 63. Okay, I say let's go ahead and call it. Great. Thank you for answering that poll. Ooh, got a few in the end. All right, let's go ahead and move back to the slides. Oh, we have one more. Let's keep going. Where are you calling in from? Where's your location? Oh, and this comes up as a word cloud. These are fun. Wow. Midwesterners. Oh, Maryland's coming up. Okay. Look at that spread. I like this. I'm looking for 63 because that's what we got last time. All right, we're at 61. Okay, we beat 63. This is beautiful. Hello, Maryland, Chicago, Michigan, Seattle. Personally, I'm in Utah. I don't see a Utah on there. I wish I was on Slido right now. Okay. Wow. All right. We've got 72, 73. All right. Let's go ahead and close that off. Thank you for answering those polls. I don't think we have another one. Those were our two test polls anyway. Okay, here we are. So before I hand it over to our guest speakers and jump into the main presentation, I want to tell you a little bit about the Integrated Lighting Campaign, or the ILC. The ILC is a recognition program. We accept submissions of advanced lighting projects, and we recognize the best and the brightest. Of course, not literally the brightest, but you get the picture. Sometimes brightest is not always best. That's our first lesson in lighting. Um, we really like to see integrated lighting projects, as the name suggests, which in this sense, integrated means that the lighting controls work with other building systems to enhance the overall building performance. Lighting and lighting sensors hold some really valuable real estate up in the in the ceiling, meaning they have, a bird's eye view of the space, which is very an important perspective for collecting all types of information. So these lighting systems and lighting sensors have the ability to relay that very useful data and information that they capture to other building systems, like occupancy information, ambient daylight, temperature, humidity, location of assets. So there's all sorts of cool things you can do and use the lighting system as the backbone. We also really like to recognize advanced lighting systems and controls in buildings that overall just improve the lighting performance and go above and beyond simple on-off switching with capabilities like occupancy sensing, daylight harvesting, high-end trim, scheduling control, all the other great things that lighting systems do. We also understand that lighting control systems are not cheap. And so when real projects happen out in the world that secure unique financing to get their energy efficiency projects off the ground, we want to share their success with the industry. That's exactly what we're doing here today. The city of Berkeley was recognized last year through the Integrated Lighting Campaign for their lighting upgrade at the Berkeley Public Safety Building, which used a unique type of financing from the utility to cover the project costs, and that in turn makes their community safer and saves taxpayers money. So I am honored to introduce our two speakers of the day. Next slide. Alice LaPierre has been the City of Berkeley's energy efficiency project manager and staff building scientist for the past 23 years. She has overseen more than 100 energy efficiency and electrification projects, from lighting upgrades to building envelope testing and thermal improvements to HVAC and water heater upgrades. Dahlia Moodie founded Energy Conservation Options, ECO, an independent Black woman-owned energy management firm leveraging business opportunities from state, local, and federal policy implementation to build local industry capacity. Thank you so much for joining us today. With that, I'm going to move on to the next slide and just hand it right off to Alice to kick us off. Alice, take it away.
Oh, next slide, please. Thank you. So this is our public safety building, and the reason I thought this would be a really good project is because everyone thought of this building as a new building. But there was certainly a lot of opportunities that we found. And the biggest one, of course, was lighting. Um, New buildings are often built with older technology because the codes here in California are done every 3 years. So they're by the time the building actually gets built, the design code could be 2 to 3 years behind what the present is. So it's important to look at every single building that's more than 10 years old for opportunities. And the public safety building is a really good case study for this. Next slide, please. So when we first looked at this building, it was 16 years old when we first looked at it. It has 24/7 operations. And while not a huge building, there were signs that there were really going to be some opportunities for energy reduction, including demand energy reduction. The jail, because there's a jail in the building, the designers chose to use non-operable windows for security. And this limited any passive ventilation opportunities. So we started looking at other ways to reduce energy and improve the indoor quality of the space. And so lighting turned out to be the very biggest of all of these. Next slide, please. So this is the front facade of the building, showing the older lighting in the lobby. This was taken in the evening by our contractor, Dahlia Moodie. It was lit with fluorescent lighting, which was the most efficient lighting at the time when the building was designed in the 1990s. But as you can see, this has some problems. Next slide, please. Many of the areas in this building have lighting that's on 24/7. And it's just due to the functions of the building. So there's stairwells, hallways here in the basement. This is the basement level. Showing certain areas that require that 24/7 lighting. Some areas have inadequate occupant controls to allow the lighting to operate more efficiently. So if you don't hit the switch, the light stays on. Next slide, please. The main floor, which is the public facing floor from that lobby, and the light purple you could see on the bottom left side there. That lobby is open and lit 24/7. This floor includes a jail, hallways and stairwells, also lit 24/7. Next slide, please. The main offices for administration are up on the 3rd floor. So while these are not lit 24/7, the lighting controls are just still those simple toggle switches, which are on the left. Which are left on most of the time. The 911 dispatch center, which is obviously operating 24/7, it uses a huge amount of energy, and you'll see why in a minute. Next slide, please. So with about 50% of the building illuminated all the time, there's inadequate occupant controls within the remaining spaces. And the lighting seemed to be a really good choice for this retrofit. Additionally, some of the lighting quality was beginning to suffer as it aged. We had replaced some lights as they had burned out over the years, but a lot of them had just been left on and left in place and were aging pretty badly. The color rendering was poor in many areas, and lumen output had dropped, and coverage was less than what was needed. Remember, this was installed in 2000 and was already 20-year-old technology when it still met the code at the time. So we had a ways to go. Next slide, please. So here's a look at the pre-retrofit electricity bill for this building. You'll notice that the monthly kWh was about 98 to 110,000 kWh on average throughout the year. And the demand energy ranged from 180 to 210. In this case, for this particular month, it was 223 kW, which is pretty high for a 66,000 square foot building. We knew that reducing that constant lighting load was going to reduce the baseline energy and therefore reduce the demand energy. Next slide, please. So here's some of the existing conditions we were working with. The older T8 2L lamps had electronic ballast, but the fixtures themselves had pretty poor coverage just because of the design of them. The watt per fixture was high compared to newer LEDs. And the lumen outputs or the foot candles was reduced in part by the fixture design, but also from the age of the lamps themselves. Some areas had track lighting, such as the 911 dispatch center, and those lights get really, really hot. The staff there, they choose to keep their window shades drawn and not rely on natural light. And they use electric lighting for everything. So because they want that spotlighting on their desks. So the track canisters were 100-watt halogens, which get pretty hot, and really add to the air conditioning demands on this in this space. And what that ended up doing was basically having the air conditioning unit that serves this area fail about 5 years prematurely. So there's an incredible amount of heat generated in this space. Next slide, please. Lighting controls were primarily toggle switches. There's only a couple of places that had dimmer switches, and it's like the police captain's offices, but that was pretty much it. Everything was a toggle switch. So as you can imagine, when there's a call for the police to head out, for some incident, they're not stopping to think about turning off the lights when they leave. Those lights are on, even though they're toggle switch and they had the ability to be controlled, they were not being turned off all the time. Virtually no spaces had occupancy or vacancy sensors, even though the technology was available at the time. So it's up to our building inspector to catch errors for things if they see it on the plan and they don't see it in the building. The contractor is going to put in what they have on the truck. This we know from years of construction projects. Next slide, please. So this is the back hallway to the booking area. So it's already a pretty grim place to end up. And it's really made further depressing by the lighting coverage from those flat surface mounted fixtures or recessed fixtures. The lighting left a lot of dark patches on the walls and on the floor and certainly under those chairs in the back. And it's just not a great place. Next slide, please. And we're back out in the lobby here. So you can see some of the lighting from the inside. It's a perfectly lovely day outside in this photo, but you can see that really old, really aged fluorescent light fixture is just not giving out the output that it was designed to give out. And so even though it's still functioning, and this is kind of how some maintenance staff would see it, it's still working, why would we replace it? But clearly there's a quality problem there that need to be addressed. So the way these compact fluorescent works is that they dim over time and the color temperature degrades and you just don't get that output. When you see a lamp kind of doing this, you really need to change it out. It's time, it's past its useful life. So next slide, please. I'm going to turn this over to the incredible Dahlia Moodie of Energy Conservation Options, our lighting contractor for this project. Dahlia, take it away.
Thank you, Alice. Thanks for that nice overview of the project. Next slide, please. So just before we get into this, I wanted to kind of reiterate some of the things that Alice mentioned in terms of what our goals were. So when we went into the project and saw the conditions, our number one goal was to do a deep reduction of energy use, but on top of that, do a very significant improvement of light distribution. We needed to add controls And we had the opportunity to do that at a far less expense than would previously be necessary. And then the other thing is like a really positive side effect that Alice mentioned is the reduction of heat. So when you remove all that wattage and heat being produced by the lighting, then you also get the positive side effect of heat reduction as well as less demand on the compressors in the refrigeration as well as HVAC systems. So in order to start out with the kind of like the general lighting that was necessary in the building, we selected the Philips Evo Kit. And the reason that we selected the Philips Evo Kit is that it's got an integrated control. And that means that once you put up the fixture, it can talk to a switch in the room. It could also be grouped together to, be programmed for numerous lighting fixtures to work similarly in a room. And then also be less costly for the actual wiring of the controls. Now, Alice mentioned that when the building was built originally, 20 something years ago, that lighting controls were available, and that is absolutely true. But they are very costly to install because in order to install what would be considered integrated controls at that time, there was a significant amount of wiring that had to happen above the ceiling. And if you had a hard ceiling, which is, no drop ceiling or T-bar, then you either had to do it a surface mount or somehow get behind the fixtures and basically tandem wire them. So that became very expensive. And unfortunately, for a lot of buildings, that made it almost impossible to get those controls in. But now we have the opportunity to use integrated controls in the general lighting in a building, as well as on the exterior of the building that will allow us to achieve controls in a room. And these lighting fixtures are not only integrated, but they do learn the behavior of people in the room. They are able to react to daylight, motion, sound. So they're integrated multi-level control. Next slide. Okay, so the most important focus of facility lighting retrofit, in our opinion, the critical goals, number one is to ensure that you have skilled electricians and installers. This is a very important component, particularly when it comes to warranty and quality of work. We use high quality materials, meaning that we're going to look for the manufacturer that is going to be the most responsive and has a track record of meeting the goals of the life cycle of the product, and that they're going to be committed and around in the event something happens. The manufacturers that we use when we contact them during the warranty period, and keep in mind that these warranty periods are between 5 and 10 years, we let them know that we've got a failure. They ship out the replacement within a couple days. And so as soon as we're able to receive that, we're able to get back with our customer and get those installed. And in a public safety building, that's quite important in order to make sure that there's that there's no lighting outages in the building. So as mentioned, we're looking to make sure that we have high quality installations, fewer premature failures by having a high quality product, and that our manufacturers stand by the product and are prompt in their response to warranties. And we also do our best to ensure that we've got local installers. In the situations we're in, we do try to respond to any warranty or service issues within 24 to 48 hours. And that is really important to our customers. Again, making sure that we don't have outages at a public safety building is critical. And so we're able to achieve that. Next slide, please. Okay, so we showed you the Philips fixture earlier, that is the integrated fixture that we use in the general lighting area. And one of the really nice things about the Philips is that and this idea of making it more feasible and affordable to have controls is that they're able to use a control that's called Illumra. And that Illumra switch actually uses kinetic energy in order to send a signal to the fixture and communicate what is necessary, whether it's dimming, off, on, and or the idea that you also still have the integrated controls for occupancy in that fixture when it's necessary. So if you haven't heard of those, it'd be great to take a look at the Illumra and look at that with regards to your controls. And keeping in mind that at the end, they're not only kinetic, but there's at no time do they need to be wired or need batteries. So there's no battery failures there either. Next slide, please. Okay, so the other thing that we are pretty aggressive about is eliminating the perception that it's necessary to clap and move around in order to keep your occupancy sensor on. And so with the multi-tech Leviton wall switch, we use these in bathrooms and we'll use them in conference rooms. And the nice thing about this particular switch is that it detects motion, occupancy, sound, or vibration. It actually can detect the change in the pressure in the room and know whether or not it should be responding with lights. So you eliminate this idea that the end user has to do anything in order to make that work. And with that idea of making it fully automated that way, a very positive outcome is that the end user tends not to dismantle, disconnect, or damage the control because it's actually doing what they need it to do without them thinking about it. So if you've seen those controls in your facility over the years and they've got some type of damage, often that's because that control is outdated and not as responsive as it needs to be for the client. Okay, next, please. Now, this particular control that I want to talk to you about is going to take us to the exterior of the building, to your parking field, your garages. We've actually used these with recreation fields, basketball courts, tennis courts, any place where you've got fairly high wattage fixtures that you want to have controlled over a program time. And also what it allows you to do is create what's called scenes. And those scenes are, when you're going to dim, how the light's going to look at certain points. But this handheld remote would allow you as the owner to be able to, or your facilities engineers, engineering people to actually make changes to the outdoor field lighting when necessary. It could be something like you have a event happening and instead of having the lights really bright, you can actually bring them down for that event and make it a little more cozy. And then once you're done, you can bring it back up to the normal public field use. Now, these are great for energy savings because what they do is they add another layer of ability to use high-end lighting and low-end lighting. So if you're in the high-end mode, you would assume that there's people in the parking area and you need full illumination. But on the low end, which you can pull all the way down to about 15% of the current, you're able to bring the lighting down, but not turn it off. A lot of facility owners feel that their clients or their tenants don't want the parking lot to be blacked out in order to save energy. So what this does is it allows you to take it down to a very low level, still illuminate the parking lot or the parking field. And then when there's motion within 40 feet of the light fixture that you can determine how that light's going to turn up and then either go to midpoint or high. And you can do that based on sensitivity. So 40 feet is one level of sensitivity. You can wait until somebody's closer and get that benefit of the light coming up only when necessary. Now, another positive side effect to that way of controlling the lights is that if you have security watching your parking field and the lights are on the low end, once those lights start to come up, it takes them to their eye to where that light is illuminating. And so it gives another layer of ability to see movement around a parking lot. And there's a lot of positive feedback around how that's helpful to tenants and workers at various facilities. Go to the next slide, please. Okay, so we talked about this idea of having the handheld control, but we wanted to give you a better idea of like how it's integrated into the system. So on your very far right, you can see that there is a Cree fixture. And this just happens to be what we used on this parking lot. And I'm a big fan of Cree because of the way they use their integrated controls. But on the right, you see there's a white round, looks like a bubble. And that is the sensor that is picking up the motion from the handheld programming. And the sensor that is this far left rectangular with the round little dial on it, that is what's embedded behind that lens. And so those three things work in tandem to, to work in tandem to create this integrated lighting control. And one of the things that I didn't mention on the previous slide is that you can have the photocell work only, or you can have the photocell work in conjunction with the lighting fixture. You can also integrate a time clock so that you have, let's say you have an astronomical time clock that's going to follow the sun through the seasons. You can make sure that that astronomical time clock is set so that no power is sent to the fixtures until it is actually time. And that way you can have like a double custody of control. And we find some people like to do that too, just in case there's other issues with the lighting. Okay, so go to the next slide, please. And I think I'm going to hand it back to Alice.
Thank you, Dahlia. That was wonderful. I love your presentations. Thanks. So as you can imagine, like most local governments, we don't really have a reserve of funds to do large maintenance projects. Fortunately, the California Public Utilities Commission has created a program for utilities to use to offer zero interest loans for their customers for completing energy efficiency improvements. So this loan is funded by the utility user tax, where it's applied to, which is applied to all utility bills and managed by the IOU. In our case, it's Pacific Gas and Electric. It has a number of benefits, including paying the contractor upfront, which I like. I don't like to manage money if I can help it. This is a great solution for me. And it relieves them for customers for also having to front the costs for all of these projects. The amount of the loan is calculated on the using the predicted energy savings from the assessment that are done. And we rely on our contractor, Dahlia, for help with that. And all of the lighting projects themselves must use DLC rated or Energy Star rated lighting to qualify. And the project has to show energy savings, minimum of, in our case, a minimum of $1,000 or $1,000, I think. And the minimum amount of the loan, I think, is $5,000. So the utility reviews and approves all of the products, and they go back over the energy saving calculations and the payback period, and approve them if they meet their criteria. So note that all of these projects are registered with the Department of Industrial Relations, and that ensures that their contractors used in these projects are going to pay prevailing wages, which for the city of Berkeley is very important. So this is another reason we really liked working with ECO. Next slide, please. Hello, next slide. There we go. So our process, of course, Big Berkeley, our process was a little different than it is now in the beginning. Back in 2016, when we started this, there was only one commercial loan available. And we determined that the conditions of the loan package were not suitable for a government. It had things in there that really related to businesses and not local governments. But what we did was we approached the utility and said we needed to create a new loan package, which meant rewriting it and then resubmitting the loan package to the CPUC, or the loan agreement to the CPUC, the California Public Utilities Commission, for approval. It caused a 6-month delay in the project. And it means now that other cities have a suitable loan package that they can use for financing all kinds of energy efficiency things. Next slide. So here's our actual loan terms showing the project costs in cell A. You can see we spent nearly to the cap of $250,000. The average rate per kWh in cell C was, you can see, is quite low compared to what it is now. The estimated amount of energy savings are sort of over in the gray cell on the left, 32,818 a year, which is a nice payback for this. And our payback years are, a little over 7.5 years. So we're coming up on that end of that. And after that payback period, all of the savings will accrue to the city of Berkeley. So the department's going to be very happy when this loan is done. Dahlia, do you want to talk at all about your experience as a contractor working with OBF?
Yeah, actually, I would. Thank you, Alice. I appreciate that. I really want to take it from the perspective of how the OBF really benefits the client. And Alice, chime in if you'd like. But one of the, there's a few points that I'd like to make. And one very important point is that the OBF allows the city or the client and the contractor, our company, to develop the project and to do that carefully. And you can actually include the cost of project development in the OBF. So I really feel like that helps to improve the quality of how the project is developed, and it also improves the carefulness of the project. The other thing is that once we do the audit and go out and come back with our details and the information that we want to develop into the project, we're able to put that into a what's called the lighting workbook, particularly in this case where it's a lighting project. You can do multiple project or multiple measures, but in this one it was lighting and controls only. So we put that into a lighting workbook, and then that lighting workbook is submitted to the utility. The utility then does a verification of our findings and our recommendations in order to ensure that these metrics that Alice just shared with you in terms of the cost of the project, the savings that'll happen over time, and the payback is going to actually meet the requirements of the program. The other thing that it does is on the closeout of the project, there is a verification of all that we installed and ensuring that those products, even if we had to make some changes, are still going to drive or improve the payback and the savings from the project. So you get that support from the OBF program that really helps you to know and be able to have a involved but a little bit of a hands-off approach to the quality of the project. So you don't have to be the expert because you've got the OBF program with oversight over the contractor, and the contractor, of course, is hopefully your best expert in developing these projects. And then the last thing that I wanted to mention is that in this project, in majority of them, we're also able to budget what's called M&V, so that's measure and verification, through the warranty, not the warranty, but through the life of the loan. So that's going to be through the payback period. Whenever there's a warranty issue or a service request related to the lights installed, we have already budgeted the dollars it would take to go out to the site and repair those issues or get the warranty handled immediately. So now you don't have, during the payback period, you're able to avoid, out-of-pocket expenses. So that payback period is not only a time when you're generating $32,000 in this case, in savings, but you're also avoiding the cost of maintenance for a new system that you have. So those are really positive outcomes of the OBF from a contractor's perspective that I wanted to share.
Thank you so much. Okay, next slide. So here's what you've all been waiting for, some before and after. Here's the locker room. If you look on the left, you can see that it was kind of dim back there. And if you look on the right, you can see, oh, look, there's a ventilation grill. You could barely see in the other one. Next slide, please. The firing range, here's the before and after, much clearer lighting. They really like that. I'm hoping it improves their aim. Next slide, please. That restroom that we started out with, you can see the difference. I mean, these pictures were taken minutes apart. You can see there's still a paper towel on the floor below the dispenser there. It's just a great difference in the lighting there. We don't need warm romantic lighting in a bathroom. We want to see things. Next slide, please. And then the hallway to the booking area. As Dahlia pointed out, this is the kits provide that she put in, the Philips Evo kits put out so much better light, much better coverage on the walls. There's not quite the security scary thing of, is anything tucked into those chairs? It's just a great improvement. And I literally took that picture in January of this year. So that lighting quality has not degraded even a little. It's fantastic. Next slide, please. The lobby. Okay, so those very severely degraded lamps were replaced with the color that was in there originally. And you can see that it mimics the daylight that's out there, so you do get that daylight coloring everywhere. Next slide, please. And it continues all the way up that stairwell, so you can see it really changes the look and feel of the place. It's much cleaner. It feels a lot more professional in there. Next slide, please. So as we look at the energy consumption over the long term, you can see that the kilowatt hours per day, and that's really the better way of looking at this, because it avoids any kind of hiccups in the data or extreme high and low energy use. It just gives you an average per day. And even then you can see like some of the bills, that second arrow in the middle there was a shortened billing period the day or before that, in the month before that. So that allowed me to average out things. That's one of the reasons I do that. And then there was a big hiccup in the billing with bill credits and just rebates and other weird things going on there. So I like to use, when I do an assessment, I like to do an average kWh per day to see what's going on. And you can see the trend line has shown that we have been able to maintain that drop in energy consumption even post-COVID. So next slide, please. Here now, this is the demand energy for the building. And there's some odd things going on here that I'll try and explain. So the first arrow, red arrow on the left, is when the air conditioning unit that I mentioned before in the 311 center went offline. So we had a big drop in energy. And of course, like I mentioned before about having reserves of funds, it takes us a while to set aside the money or reallocate money to install something. When we did install it, you can see there's this massive boost of kW, of demand energy. That was because when they installed it and did the commissioning of the site, of the fixture, they didn't call the utility and say they were going to do this, so the utility just billed us for that. So that was a very expensive lesson, and one that all of you should take note of if you have to do a big commissioning. And a commissioning is basically like a stress test that you take at the doctor's office, but you're doing it for the equipment. You're really pushing the equipment and getting the max energy use out of it. So then you can see the next arrow is the lighting retrofit and the big drop in demand since then. So we're very happy about that. Next slide. So why do we want to control the demand? Because the cost of demand energy is really expensive. You can see that it's $18 plus per kW before the retrofit here. That's a lot of, that can be a lot of money. Next slide, please. But after the retrofit, you can see that it has dropped considerably to 152 or 179, depending on the PG&E divides up their bills according to spring billing rates and winter or summer billing rates and winter billing rates. So we switched, but the cost of that summer demand energy is over $39 a kW, up from 18 in 2017. So it's really important to pay attention to the demand energy. I can't stress that enough. Next slide, please. So I really want to thank our entire team. And as you can see, it's mostly women up there. The chiefs, one of our police chiefs is now a woman, but it's Dahlia Moodie from ECO, our police department in the back row there, the two captains, our administrative fiscal manager, Chuck Gunter, and police chief Jen Lewis. And then not present, unfortunately, were our facilities maintenance guys who came and unlocked doors and everything. Andrea Schuber from PG&E was a godsend in helping with that OBF loan application. That was 6 months of fun there. And then, of course, myself. But just want to say that a female team doing this work can be just as or more successful in many cases than other teams. Next slide, please. I think that's it. Thank you all so much.
That is great. Thank you, Alice and Dahlia. Great project, great story to tell, and successes to share. Thank you for telling us. Let's move on to the next slide. So I'm going to make one quick pitch to the ILC, the Integrated Lighting Campaign. You can now see one of the benefits of being recognized. You may get featured on a webinar such as this, but if you're interested in submitting for a recognition for a project that you might have, I encourage you to do so. The submission period is now open through March 31st. So if you have a lighting project that you think fits the bill, go to integrated.lighting.energy.gov and you could submit for recognition there. You can have case studies and infographics developed for your project, DOE exposure through social media, emails and newsletters, and all sorts of other promotion. You'll be featured in industry publications and social media. Like I said, invitation to speak on your project like we are today, use of an ILC logo if you want to use that, and a whole suite of technical resources and the technical lighting experts at P&L happy to help you with any future or current projects. So there's my pitch. Let us know if you have a lighting project. We'd love to work with you. Okay, now I believe we are going to move on to Q&A. The timing is great. We're going to spend 5 or 6 minutes answering questions, and then I've got a few wrap-up slides. So I think we did really well on timing. Nice job, Alice, Dahlia. Okay, let's take a look. So I'll just kind of start reading from the top, I think, and I'm going to go ahead and reserve the right to say I'm going to follow up with you after if we can't answer your question or if we don't have the right folks on the call. But let's go ahead and start at the top. Do you also look at lighting considerations for outdoors? Adding controls for outdoor lighting can not only improve energy efficiency, but also reduce the negative impacts on species that are affected by light pollution. I totally agree. And maybe this question was asked before Dahlia went into the exterior lighting. Alice, do you want to say anything more? Did you consider light pollution or light trespass when working on? There is a small parking lot there and then some building facade lighting.
Yeah, one of our primary concerns is the safety for the police. So they definitely do not want it over illuminated. They are conscious of anything from, um, this is Berkeley, so people, sleeping in odd corners to an active shooter situation. So they want just enough illumination for safety so that they can get around the parking lots, but they don't want it so well lit up that they can be viewed through the fencing as
Hmm.
targets as they exit the building. So it's an absolute real concern of theirs, and we respected that, and Dahlia came up with some great solutions for it.
Definitely. Thank you. I will also mention, if you're not familiar with the International Dark Sky Association, they have three um, aspects of good outdoor lighting that it should be full cutoff, shielded, so no uplight or even horizontal light. It should be shielded down. It should be warm color temperature, and it should be controlled. And so I think the fixture selection that City of Berkeley made here meets those. And I think Dahlia, you were saying they don't go full off at night, but they do dim down to 20%. And I think that it is intentional, like Alice was saying, for the safety aspect and making sure that no one's walking into a dark space, or you can kind of see if someone's, even though the light level is still 20%, it's definitely still visible. Um, so yeah,
Yes.
Dahlia, and you came on, I'll give you a chance to answer too.
Yeah, I was going to say that we do deliberately make sure that we're managing to avoiding what we call lighting pollution, and um, and the 15 to 20% low level is by design. So a customer can design that higher if they'd like to, but it is all customizable. So that's the other good news about having the integrated controls and the programming capability.
Great. Okay. Thank you for that. Let's move on to the next one. Asking about plug loads. Um, what are the strengths and weaknesses of today's plug load management capabilities with integrated lighting? I'll take this one. This is a common aspect of integrating lighting with another building system. And so most typically, you're using an occupancy sensor in the lighting system to either shut off, uh, turn on or turn off plug loads that are managed and connected to the occupancy sensor. The strengths are that you have additional energy savings, you have extended device life if they're being turned off, you're not having that phantom load. But the weakness is you don't want to put every appliance on an on-off switch like network systems or the internet router. You don't want the internet going on and off just when someone's in the building. So often those loads that are appropriate for plug loads are lower power, stuff like cell phone chargers, task lighting. Um, Maybe a space heater under someone's desk is a good one. But I encourage you, we have a lot of good resources on plug loads, and there's some resources there. Um, okay, I do. Let's take one more. I'm just keeping an eye on the time here to make sure we can get you all out of here. Catherine, there's another question here, and this is a long one. I actually chatted our in-house lighting expert, Michael Meyer, to answer this one, and he wrote me a nice answer, but I'm going to follow up with you after the call to because it's a long one. Let's ask one more about the Leviton wall switch, and maybe Dahlia can answer this. The Leviton wall switch with the pressure sensor can the Leviton wall switch sensor see some sort of false trigger due to mechanicals turning on and off or pressure increases and drops in a confined space?
So I think I can answer that pretty accurately with the idea that the Leviton wall switch will learn the patterns of a room. So it's kind of difficult to say exactly whether or not that mechanicals turning on and off would be a problem, but it actually it should learn that that's a false trigger.
Interesting. That's
Mhm.
yeah, I didn't know that. That's good to
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
Okay, so we do have a number of other questions that I would love to answer, but I said I want to get you out of here on time, and I want to reserve a few minutes to close up here. So if you asked a question, I'll go through and make sure that we get them answered. So you should be hearing from me. Give me a week or so to get through all these because we got a lot. I see 17 questions, but thank you for asking these questions and being involved in the conversation. Okay, let's go to those last few slides. So. Um, All right. So, as I mentioned, this webinar is part of the 2023-2024 Better Buildings webinar series. As you can see, we have a great lineup of presentations all the way through March. Visit the Better Buildings Solution Center to learn more and register for each one of these events. Um, Next slide. We hope you will join us next Tuesday, March 5th, for our webinar titled Getting a Handle on Clean Hydrogen. Join this webinar to explore the clean hydrogen landscape, learn more about the industry applications of clean hydrogen, and hear how DOE is accelerating market transformation. Slide. Next, we are pleased to announce the registration for the 2024 Better Buildings, Better Plants Summit. Um, the summit will be in the heart of Washington, D.C. on April 2nd through the 4th. In addition to engaging in interactive sessions, attendees can look forward to plenty of opportunities to network with their fellow industry peers and experts, explore the session tracks, and book your accommodations on the Better Building Solution Center. I will add a plug for my presentation. I will be there in Washington, D.C., talking about the integrated lighting campaign and yet another recognized participant for that one. So keep an eye out for us there. Next slide. I will talk about the Better Climate Challenge Roadshow. Cleveland edition is here. Watch now as DOE experts and several of our Better Buildings and Better Plants partners see how organizations are putting decarbonization strategies into action. From from Cleveland Cliffs of City to Cleveland and Cleveland Clinic, these industry leaders are making major headway in emissions reductions and sharing strategies for others to follow suit. Rock on and tune in to a full series of the Better Building Solution Center today. Okay, I think that's the last one. With that, thank you so much, Alice and Dahlia. Thank you for taking the time to be with us today. Thank all of you for joining. Feel free to contact us. Our information is on the screen. And again, if we didn't get to your questions during Q&A, we will do that. I encourage you to follow Better Buildings Initiative on LinkedIn and X for all the latest news. You can find our handles by the respective icons on the left side of your screen. You will receive an email notice when today's recording slides and transcripts are available on the Better Building Solution Center. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a good rest of the day.